Hey everybody, this is Ray Flick, television beat writer for Bleeding Cool, and if you haven't heard, I've been doing a little moonlighting on the film side for the past couple weeks. Been checking out the Tribeca Film Festival in New York City for Bleeding Cool, and I've had an opportunity to cover a very cool gaming panel and some cool television stuff, and also some cool films and documentaries, and one of them I'm going to be talking about today is a horror film called The Dark. It is a feature film premiere from writer and co-director Justin P. Lange, co-directed with Clemens Hufnagel, who is also responsible for the look and visuals of the movie, which is going to be important when I talk about it, and also stars Nadia Alexander from 7 Seconds and The Sinner, and also Toby Nichols from Underground and Marvel's Iron Fist. Let me start off by saying right from the very beginning, this is not your typical horror movie, and if I had to give the creative studio and public relations team a little bit of friendly critics advice, market it a little softer. Because a lot of that, I thought what I was seeing up front was giving me much more of a horror vibe than I get. It is a horror movie, but it is a horror movie more, I think, of a softer let the right one in, cross with the little girl who lives down the lane. Yeah, that's more of the vibe I'm going for. So that's the one recommendation I would make, is that I went into this thinking it was going to be harder horror than it was. I'm glad it wasn't, because I feel like that would have taken away from the message. And I give Lang a lot of credit, because when you're really looking at the idea of abuse, abuse of children, isolationism, the way we connect and bond with one another, to take this idea of the zombie undead and mash it with that kind of social commentary and do it in a very harsh, realistic way, I found myself drawn into. I thought Lang did an amazing job of giving us an aspect of the zombie movie genre that I'm not saying we necessarily haven't seen before, but I think it shows that the zombie genre and horror has a lot of complexities to it, and it just doesn't have to be either The Walking Dead or Z Nation. That there's a lot of roads in between, and we've seen it in other films, but I think this film does an excellent job in showing and really demonstrating to people, look, these issues are still important. If we can't get you talking about reality, we're going to take you into this world and still show you that even in a zombified, undead world, the harshness and realities of humans and man still will always outweigh the horrors that we come up with in our films and in our own minds. And I thought the movie did an excellent job of doing that. Not everybody's necessarily going to be comfortable with the approach. There are some people who feel like you just shouldn't take such serious subject matters like child abuse, Stockholm syndrome that Alex goes through, issues like that, and it should only be saved for either documentaries or real world scenarios. But I think the message that Lang gets across, and I think that Alexander and Nichols get across through their performances, and again, I would say even as Hufnagel gets across just through the visuals of this film, I think it shows that, yes, we can take any type of genre and use it to address these basic human matters. I mean, we are talking about human horrors. I would think the horror genre would be one of the best ways to reflect that. To give you a general idea and overview, again, I don't do spoilers in my movie reviews. At least I hope I'm not doing a lot of major spoilers, so if I am, I apologize in advance. But the movie begins, we meet a fugitive on the run by the name of Hoffer, who has to get to this old house, haunted house, for some reason. We see he's on the run, we see he's not a good man, and the house he gets to is where we get our introduction to Mina. And after, let's say, a very interesting meet up with Mina, we get to know a little bit about her. First, she runs around the wooded areas known as Devil's Den. She disappeared years ago and now essentially stalks these areas and lives in these areas, feeding, feasting, living, and everything else on strangers and everyone else who makes their way through there. We learn later on in the movie that Mina has suffered probably more so in her life than she does in her undead life. A victim of an abusive mother, sexually assaulted by an abusive boyfriend. It just, we see the horrors again, the horrors of real life, showing and reflecting to be in many instances the worse than the horrors that we're seeing of the now. Now, where it gets interesting is that Hoffer wasn't just traveling to this location by himself. He had a package, and a package in the form of kidnapped teen Alex, who is just a psychological and physical mess when we see him. We don't know how long he's been in custody or what he's had to do, behaviors, practices, or things like that. But I mean, if there was textbooks, as I mentioned before, textbook case for Stockholm syndrome, Alex is definitely that character. It just the fact that he's more concerned about Hoffer's well-being than the fact that he be away from him, again, speaks volumes. we get a sense of some of the abuses. We can only imagine some of the other abuses that were put upon this boy. But one of the things we do know is that he was blinded, and that is a factor that comes into play in the sense that Alex can't see Mina and what she looks like. So their conversations, again, it's more about feel and sense and hearing, which again I think also adds to the level of intimacy in their relationship. For the remainder of the movie, we are left with, the police starting to track down Hoffer, and of course that's going to bring Alex and Mina to have to escape into the woods. And without going into further detail, it's interesting what Mina's choice is going to be, because what her typical practice is for strangers in the wood is feast, survive, and move on. But is she going to sacrifice Alex, who is somebody who is actually making her feel things that she hasn't been feeling? She's not just feeling the anger and the rage and the need to feed, but she's starting to feel a little more herself, and is that something that she wants to give up and give away? And again, I think overall you'll see the film, and I think you will take away a lot from the film. It is a heartbreaking, heart-wrenching, sad movie. The horror comes, I think, from the emotion, even more from the visuals. But I do want to talk about some of the main points that I did like. The script itself, again, I mentioned this before, bold and daring. It doesn't hit you over the top, but it gives you, I think, a frank understanding of how these two characters would be interacting with one another, and it just, again, I think just there's a freshness to it that I appreciated. It's boldness in its tackling subject matters that usually are considered taboo for the horror genre, because let's face it, people still look at the horror genre of the certain stereotype and cliche. I think was very, very bold, and I really appreciated that. Again, I've mentioned before, Clemens Hufnagel. It just, the look, the visual, and anybody else, let me say this, who is responsible for the look and visual of this film, props to you, because again, to me, it just had that, for lack of a better phrase, it kind of had that, it brought a Blair Witch Project creepiness to it, and I go, no, they're not the same, I can't explain it. But it also reminded me of this horror film called The Abandoned, and if you haven't check that out. In the sense that the way it's shot, the way the structures are shot, the woods are shot, that they become both vast as well as very suffocatingly intimate, and I think that just really came across in the visuals that I was seeing in this film. The sense that the wilderness was their ally and was a character and was something that was living and breathing in this film. I think that really came across beautifully in the visuals that we were seeing. And last but certainly not least, again, the movie is going to either sink or swim on the performances from Alexander and Nichols. It just, and Mina and Alex, it just, their chemistry, the way they interact with each other, the intensity and the fire. I talk about the whole idea about Alex losing his sight, and it does add a level of intimacy and forced trust between the two of them, and the way those trust dynamics switch back and forth between them. I think this was a very good quality movie for a first feature film. I think it's a very good quality start. There are little nitpicking nuances I could say about it. Pacing may have gotten slow in one or two areas. Some of the scenes, some of the visuals may have gone on a little longer than expected. The overall arc of it we've seen before, but again, to me this is nitpicking stuff. It is a movie that if you're going into to not see a horror movie, but to see a sad, heartbreaking, dramatic movie filled with both real and imagined horrors, The Dark was definitely a worthy screening. I'm very, very glad I got a chance and appreciation to see it, and I hope you get a chance to see it too, whether it's in the theater or whether the format, streaming or otherwise, you may get a chance to check it out. But again, folks, that's me, Ray Fluke, television beat writer for Bleeding Cool, giving you my thoughts on The Dark as part of our Tribeca Film Festival screening. Really appreciate you joining me for this. Hope you get a chance to check it out. Also, please make sure you check out Bleeding Cool for a lot of other great pop culture coverage that we do. Television, films, comic books, video games, collectibles, anything and everything across the pop culture landscape, and everything and anything under the pop culture sun. We've got it going on at bleedingcool.com, so please make sure you check it out. Enjoy the start of your week, folks. I'm going to pretend like I wasn't looking for my mouse there as I was looking to shut this off. I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you on the inner tubes. Take care.